the link or promote it anywhere that you're going to be talking about it, you might get some other people in there.
I agree, but I'm going to be doing this. I'm just going to be going live after I watch the films. Pretty much, I'm going to be going live like
Gotcha.
20,
Okay.
yeah. Or hold on, I'm playing it on another thing. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, I agree. I'll tweet it out now so people can go in. But yeah, today and tomorrow, this whole weekend, I know a lot of people are going to be busy. There's going to be a lot of anniversary streams going on, or like the EFAP and all them. But yeah, I assume people will just come in and see it if they can. But
now, do you do a bunch of stuff with those groups, or is it just you and you just go wherever you go?
We're going live on the Fandom Collective YouTube channel. Flipped Out and I pretty much run it, and we help share out people, promote everybody. And we've promoted quite a few people. We're post over like around 400 people, but I guess people more frequently post around 200. So that are active for the most part.
I'm finding two fandom collectives. Yours is the one with the Rebel red and blue, right? Okay.
Right here. Yep, we got like 1,300 subs around.
All right.
There with that. Yeah. Thank you, man. Yeah, and we are we do lots of different stuff, but as far as right now, it's just I'm on because I've got the extra time, and I could be doing these streams on my channel, but I want to do some ones over here, get people going over here again soon. So
sure.
Yeah, and a lot of the appeal, I guess, is that because I want to be a director, and I haven't seen so many films that are like crucial to it, apparently, people will label them as. Yeah, I'm going through and watching these films, and I was going to start with Citizen Kane and Casablanca, but I saw Pig first because a buddy and I was going to see it, and just like, okay, see that now, get that started, and I did a stream on that earlier today, and just watched this. I'll watch Casablanca next and see what's up. And
so you're going through classic films that you have not seen. This is your very first time to see any of these. Is that right? I understand that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Casablanca is a very good film.
So I hear.
and it's interesting, the story on that one, because there's a few bits and pieces of the script that they were working on as they were shooting. You think that's kind of a modern era where, you know, we're doing all of these rewrites and we're making it up as we go. But you look at the history on Casablanca and how that script came together. They didn't have an ending. And they were like, okay, well, what are we gonna do? And they were figuring it out as they were shooting it. It's a really interesting story. So, but yeah, Citizen Kane.
Real quick before we get into it a little bit more, I don't think I've come across you before. So if you want to show yourself real quick, tell us about you a little bit.
Yeah, well, Sci-Fi for Me is an online platform that covers science fiction, fantasy, horror. We've been around since 2009. We have several shows that we produce as part of our channel. We're on YouTube, we're on Odyssey, and we're on all of the different socials, but we have a number of different programs where we'll do either news or commentary about various different topics, Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, and that sort of thing. So yeah, we're in a hiatus period right now with some of our productions, but we've got 2 Star Wars shows. We've got a Doctor Who show. We've got a show about horror that's made outside the United States. It's called Foreign Bodies. And so it's, lots of different things that we cover, little talk shows and news programs and whatnot. So we've been around for a while. Slowly but surely, we've been, gathering steam and growing our channel. But we're using the tortoise method rather than the hare.
That's a good way to do it these days, especially as YouTube grows and the different audiences grow and everything. It's a good method, I'd say.
And one of the things that's affected our growth, I think, is the fact that we haven't embraced the drama like a number of other channels have. We're not rage bait. We're not going to sit there and say, oh, well, we hate fill in the blank. We're angry about whatever. We generally take a little bit more mature, neutral,
like a leveled approach, essentially.
a little bit more balanced. I mean, I hate to say fair and balanced because some people don't take to that very well, but
Right.
we do try to stay, relatively, not taking sides and saying, well, if you don't disagree with us, we're gonna dox you and call you a Nazi. We don't do anything like that. So it generally has a tendency to slow down what we do because we're not right there in the thick of things, reacting and pontificating.
Right. Not doing the
things.
most recent pop culture all the time. Yeah, right there. That makes sense.
So that's who we are.
That's awesome. Well, glad to have you on, man. It's our first time interacting on here, and talking Citizen Kane, one of the oldest. I don't know if it's one of the oldest films. Honestly, they probably had films come out. Do you know what the earliest film release was? I wanted to say the 1920s, but
you've got the silent films of the 20s. Al Jolson in The Jazz Singer was the first sound picture, and I want to say that was 1927, I believe. But motion pictures have actually been around since the late 1800s. You had The Great Train Robbery was one of the first films ever made, and it was a silent picture, and it was a movie. And basically what it was is just basically the train was arriving, and as it's being projected on the screen, people see the train coming at them, and they panicked, and they left the tent where it was being broadcast because they'd never seen such a thing before. It was a brand new thing. They had no idea what it was they were looking at.
No.
But yeah, you had that, and Hollywood growing out of that with the silent pictures and whatnot. Citizen Kane was one of the biggest, most ambitious pictures with sound, especially for that time period.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're used to the big blockbuster tentpole $200 million budget films these days, but Citizen Kane was one of those where it was made pretty much on the reputation of Orson Welles, because he was he was basically, back then I guess you could say he was probably the equivalent of maybe an Elon Musk type in terms of personality and popularity and notoriety. If you want to get a fiction equivalent, maybe a Howard Stark. He's that kind of character. And Orson Welles was a writer and a director and a producer and an actor and all of these things. He was the one that was responsible for the War of the Worlds radio panic in 1938.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So when he came out with the Mercury Theater on the Air, on CBS Radio Network, he came out on Halloween night and did a radio play adaptation of the War of the Worlds, and panicked most of the East Coast because you had people that were outside shooting at the water towers with their shotguns because it looked like the tripods that were being described in the show. There was panic everywhere, and Orson Welles had to come out and say, no, it was a radio show.
Yeah, JK, guys, JK. All right.
But if you had tuned in the midst of it, you didn't know that, because the way they approached it is they were doing it as if it was just a regular radio broadcast.
Yep.
They introduced the topic. They said this is a show at the very, very, very beginning.
Right.
And then after that, they go into this orchestra is playing in the Mercury Theater, and then all of a sudden there's these newscasts that start interrupting about these meteors dropping in Grover's Mill, New Jersey, and they're sending people up and all of this. And people panicked. And off of that, Orson Welles made a name for himself. And then he decides to go in and he wants to make Citizen Kane, of course, based on the life of William Randolph Hearst, who was one of the big newspaper guys at the time. and had a reputation actually of having been one of the media moguls who might have been responsible for starting wars to sell papers.
Wow.
So, this is you had William Randolph Hearst and you had Joseph Pulitzer, and they were the big two at the time. And this is back before there was a lot of ethics in journalism. There was a lot of yellow journalism. There was a lot of very skewed, very slanted, very polarizing. Well, I guess it is very much like today.
I was about to say, it's pretty similar to today right now.
It is, yeah. But there wasn't a pretense of objectivity. There's like we're going to go sell newspapers,
right?
And so William Randolph and Hearst is still around. I mean, the Hearst family still has Hearst Television, and they're a big media conglomerate. So they haven't gone away. And of course, you've got the Pulitzer Prize, which is named after Joseph Pulitzer.
Right, makes sense. Well, that's quite a history there until you got for the film. Dang, I did not know that. But I guess if we're gonna cut right into the movie, I mean, I'm watching it now. I'm 27, and there's been only hype for it. As far as everybody just references it as one of the best films.
Yes.
Nobody ever has, as far as I can tell, just talked about it, about anything that happens in it or what about it is good. It's usually just, oh yeah, like Citizen Kane, one of the best films ever. That's usually how it's described. It's just that only. So I had no idea what I was expecting with it, which I think was nice. I like to go into some films not knowing what to expect. That way I just take it in as it is pretty much.
Yeah.
And I watched it all the way through, and I was struggling to be gripped to it. There's a lot of films, and I'm not one of the ones that needs fast pace. I don't need a whole bunch of noises. I don't need a bunch of stuff going on, because like I said before we got on here, I was watching Pig earlier. I mean, that's very slow pace. There's no action in it. It's very fine. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is another long type of slow drag, but it's good in how they do a lot of stuff. And it's so I can take ones that aren't super high pace, but. And I'm trying to understand Citizen Kane from when it came from, but I guess it's kind of hard for me to see how it's, because I've seen some other old films too. I can't say, varying from the 70s, 60s, 50s, depending on, I don't know the exact years that they all came out, but it seems like Citizen Kane would fit somewhere in there as just another one. Just based on watching the story, not knowing any background of it,
right.
Just watching the movie, that's what I would put it as, just a regular old movie.
Yes and no. Old movie, yes, 1941. And of course, it being in black and white, which was a deliberate choice.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was to do it not necessarily documentary style, but the things that you see at the very beginning of that film tie directly into the ending of the film. And the arc that's in the middle of it is Charles Foster Kane focused on all of these things that he thinks are important. And at the end of his life, he realizes that it was something else. And he missed everything. And it's one of those moments where out of everything that he experienced in his life, there was one thing that he went back to, and everybody was trying to figure out, what is this rosebud? What's rosebud? What is this?
Yeah. At the end, they tossed the sled in the fire.
Right. And essentially what it is out of all of this that Charles Foster Kane achieved, the one thing that he wanted to get back was his childhood, which was taken away from him when his mother sent him off, and his life pretty much changed after that.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout this whole thing, as you go into the interviews and the the snippets, while they're trying to figure out what this Rosebud thing is, you get all of these vignettes of his different moments in his life, and you're getting a character examination of this guy, who's very self-assured, very full of himself, and doesn't take very much seriously. But as he gets more power, and as he gets more notoriety, and as he gets more success and wealth and all of this, the more that happens, the fewer relationships he has.
Yeah,
the more
isolated he visually gets more depressed.
Yeah, and physically he gets more isolated from everybody as well. You have yes, he got married, but that goes south. He's got a best friend played by Joseph Cotton, and they in and out and back and forth, and so it's the entire movie really is about loss.
Yeah,
but the cinematography in it is fantastic, and it's one of those, when you talk about Citizen Kane being this, one of the greatest films of all time, you're talking mostly about craft, not just the acting. And a lot of the people that were in that movie were his radio play cast, and you don't see a lot of them, their faces or their features. A lot of them are in shadow, and a lot of that is, that's mood, but also these are radio guys. They're not movie actors. They're not movie stars. They're not pretty people. So it's just, we're just going to use the people that I've always worked with and throw them in there. And the cinematography, one of the things, and if you look at, I don't know, did you see the Marvel TV shows?
Not any of the recent ones, no.
Okay, so you didn't see Defenders?
I did see Defenders, yeah.
Okay, all right. So in the Defenders, there is a shot where the camera comes up over the Chinese restaurant and goes in through the skylight where they're sitting there at the table, right?
Yeah.
That's a Citizen Kane shot. And that shot in Citizen Kane, where when he's going in to interview the girl, and he's going in, and they go past the neon, and they go in through the skylight. Nobody had ever done that shot before. The cinematography on this was innovative for one. Of course,
so did a lot of firsts, I assume.
A lot of firsts, yeah. And the editor on this movie was Robert Wise, the director of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and The Day the Earth Stood Still, I think he did. West Side Story. He was the editor on this movie.
Okay. I haven't seen the films that you listed either yet. To be honest.
You haven't seen Star Trek: The Motion Picture?
I don't know when I'll ever see Star Trek. That's not high on my list. I don't know. I think
now, I'm not talking modern Star Trek. Modern Star Trek is garbage.
No, I know. Just in general, just looking at Star Trek, I don't know. Like I watched like Star Wars and Stargate, and I guess in general I kind of want a little bit of a break from sci-fi stuff. Just in the TV show scale type of stuff. Just I don't know. I've had a lot so far. I just want a little break. Probably be a few years before I watch Star Trek stuff.
A few years?
Yeah, I don't plan anytime soon. I got plenty of other stuff to catch up on beyond Star Trek. A lot of people have wanted, like, go do Doctor Who. Doctor Who? It's a lot of stuff. I don't know about that.
If you're going to start, but if you're going to start Doctor Who, I would start with the fourth Doctor, Tom Baker. Because the fourth Doctor is the best Doctor.
I've heard that a few times.
Everybody's got different opinions. In the United States, there are a lot of people, because Tom Baker's run is the first we saw in the U.S.
Okay.
Because public television got the license from the BBC to rerun it. So if you go to watch PBS, you got to watch Doctor Who. And they had a bunch of British television stuff, Blake 7, Are You Being Served, Faulty Towers, Blackadder, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Red Dwarf. But at the time, we had Doctor Who, and Tom Baker was it. And then eventually they came in and brought in John Pertwee's episodes, and then we got Peter Davison, and we got Colin Baker, and from that run forward, and then they would start scattering in stuff. But people my age, our Doctor is Tom Baker. And he's always going to be the best Doctor, no matter whoever plays the character. Tom Baker is the best Doctor.
Yeah.
But I would start with that.
Yeah, I've heard good things about certain things of the Doctor Who. Like, I feel like between Star Trek and Doctor Who, I'd probably watch Star Trek first. But
Star Trek has fewer things to catch up on. Because if you did, original series has 79 episodes, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Next Generation, DS9, both are 7 years worth, so you've got about 140, 150 episodes in those. Which is not...
How long are the episodes typically?
They were an hour with commercials, so figure they're about 45 minutes now on streaming.
Okay, not too much longer than normal shows these days. So
yeah, it's about the same.
That's actually surprising. I kind of thought that the older shows were more around 20 to 30 minutes, because there's a lot of shows now that are like 50 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But sorry, off topic a little bit there, but
it's all right.
Yeah, so Citizen Kane, I like the way that you're putting that into perspective a little bit. I feel like if I were to know more about the production of Citizen Kane, then I would see that and appreciate that. But just seeing it as what it was, just as a movie as it is, yeah, I don't know. Like I don't hate it or anything. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's a bad film. But I just don't. Just on its own, I wouldn't put it above other stuff so much. But with what you said about its history and how the production that had it, a lot of its firsts, I can see it being more recognized for that, or like praised for being the first to do all these certain film techniques, because that's something that's hard to say these days. We get a couple things in the modern day where it's like that's the first time they did something like this.
Yeah,
very rare. Just a few times where in my lifetime where at least where I noticed where that's happened. Anyway.
And a lot of those first things are technical achievements. I mean, especially with visual effects and that kind of thing. I mean, you look at
that's specifically what I'm referring to. Like, with the prequels in general, weren't the clones and all that stuff like its first of its kind of?
Yeah, there was the prequel trilogy. There was a lot of CG that had never been done before, and that was one of the things. That was one of the reasons why Lucas made those films the way he did, because he wanted to push the boundaries of visual effects.
Yeah.
So you have your actors on these giant green and blue studios with nothing around. And for what they did, sure. I mean, there's still a lot of practical effects in those films.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of CG. And I think...
Yeah, I don't think they blended them well enough through enough scenes for it to
Well, that and I think there was too much of a reliance on the new toys and not the story. I think George Lucas bought into his own press, and of course during the prequel trilogy, he didn't have a Gary Kurtz. He didn't have somebody sitting there saying, "We can't do this. We don't have the money, we don't have the time, we don't have the resources."
Right, to condense what to focus on.
Yeah,
a little harder.
Nobody would tell him no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by then he was built up to be the god, so he's like,
exactly.
all right, I'm kind of chill. I just kind of want to do this. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
But
go ahead. No, I was just going to say, Citizen Kane. Yes, there were a number of firsts. It actually was a flop in the box office, but it was nominated for 9 Academy Awards. Was booed at the ceremony every time it was mentioned because everybody hated it.
That's funny.
So it's got an interesting history because it took a while for people to really appreciate what Orson Welles had done, because he was this young upstart.
Yeah.
You know, who is this guy? Who does he
this?
think he is?
Yeah.
And he, you know, he burst onto the scene and started getting all of this stuff done and making a name for himself. But he was an upstart. You know, he was I don't know, in his 20s when he made Citizen Kane, late 20s, early 30s. You know, who's this kid? You know, and he didn't have a whole lot of respect at the time.
Right.
So, you know, because he hadn't done anything except the War of the Worlds stunt. You know, he was a radio guy.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, that's impressive for the young age doing that, breaking into the scene a bit. Yeah, I could see that making more sense there. I guess as I start to watch some of these ones, because Casablanca's next. What year was Casablanca?
Casablanca. Let me look that one up because I think. I want to say Casablanca was 1939 because it was the same year as. No, it was 1942. I had that wrong. 1942.
Okay.
Because Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind were both 1939. Casablanca was 1942. And that was the one. It's actually based on a play called Everybody Comes to Rick's. Everybody Goes to Rick's.
Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess when I'm watching those, what do you think I should keep in mind? Because because I'm 27, I'm born in the 90s with stuff, and I'm interested in film. I do find it difficult sometimes to figure out how to judge a movie that came out way before me. I mean, sometimes like when I watched Alien, for example, within the last couple of years, I watched that for the first time, and I appreciate the xenomorph looks amazing for what it is. That is great. Like, I love that. Just some aspects, like, honestly, I thought it was like, it's okay, I guess. There's some aspects that I wish were a little better for it.
Well,
I don't know if people
Alien
hear that. Yeah.
Alien was the first of its kind. It was the first-ish science fiction horror, and it was the haunted house in space. It was, you look at things like Halloween with Michael Myers, and you look at the serial killer stalker type of story.
Yeah.
And it's that in space. So this monster, the reason the monster works as well as it does, it's the same principle as we have with Jaws. It works because you don't see it that much. And you go back to what Alfred Hitchcock talked about with subjective reality and the psychology of the suggestion. Where if you have something where you have just a hint of something on the screen, or just a piece of something on the screen, or just a suggestion of something, the audience fills in the blanks with something that's probably even scarier than what you could throw up on the screen. So half of that transaction is the audience scaring themselves based on what Hitchcock had put out there as a starting point. Alien does the same thing. Jaws does the same thing. Jaws does it by happenstance because the shark wouldn't work.
Yeah, but end up working to their benefit. Yeah.
Because you don't see the shark, you just get the danger of the shark. Yeah. The tension is there because you never know where that shark's going to be.
Yeah, which that is an element that I enjoy.
Alien's the same way.
like Tremors. I saw Tremors far before I saw Jaws. I saw Jaws within the last couple of years, and when I was watching Jaws, I kept on thinking of Tremors, but I know that Jaws came first, of course. And I was like, and to me, it had a similar thing where you don't really see the worms until way later. You're just seeing the effect they have, things that are aftermath of them.
Yeah,
and I thought that was interesting. But with Alien, it was like, I don't know. I guess because everybody's like, well, look at when it came out and look at who's in it and all these things. And I'm just like, I mean, it was all right. I mean, maybe because I'm not a huge fan of the slasher films, I guess, where they're running away, getting killed. Like I'm just like, it's just, I don't know. It's not my flavor, I suppose. I love alien stuff. I love like sci-fi for the most part. And again, I love the xenomorph. That's really creative. That would be creepy as hell to have to run into at some point. The face hugger thing. My buddy Angus talks about those a lot, like how the director or the writer, I forget who, like, had these different, it's like sexual things where it's like, it's basically, it both impregnates, it like is able to impregnate a man essentially with it. And
well, it's not necessarily the writers who came up with that, because if you look at the original designs from H.R. Giger, there's a lot of that in his art that is what the xenomorph is based on. If you go to if you go to the artwork of Giger, a lot of his stuff is that mix of monstrosity and beauty and sexual stuff and dark, scary stuff.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
You're good.
But yeah, that Alien is one of those where it does that same kind of thing, where it's a first. Halloween was a first slasher picture. Alien was monster in space. Excuse me a second.
You're good.
All right, so sorry.
See,
right,
now I guess if I were to clarify this, so I said I didn't really enjoy Alien on its own, but when Aliens came out, I enjoyed them both like as a duo together,
right?
Like as if they're one movie continuation or something. Like that was really well done. I don't know.
Even though they're completely different types of films.
Yes, but I think I like that in a way because it shows like it's like one alien creature attacking people that aren't prepared to deal with that type of thing, and how they survive it, or how she survives it anyway, and how she is where she was. And then in the second one, there's people that are totally ready to handle this kind of stuff, and they are pissing their pants, and she takes charge with it and is able to do it. And I mean, I know that a lot of people don't like the like multiple aliens type of thing, but I kind of see it as, I don't know, they're more dangerous in that way, I suppose, because you saw what one could do, and then you see these ones. I mean, I think it makes sense for them to be killed by the people that are sent there, because I mean, they're the people on the first one weren't trained killers. They're in a spaceship. They can't really use all these firepower anyway, right? Didn't they make that a point in the first one, that they can't fire their firearms too much because they're inside their ship?
That actually is a scene in the second one. They were underneath the nuclear power plants.
Oh, right, yeah. No,
and they had to take up. But to your point, the first movie being just one xenomorph, and the second movie having a bunch of them, it actually works because it's an escalation.
Yeah,
we had a hint and a suggestion with all of those eggs when Kane came in, and he gets the face hugger and they end up back on the ship. But if they had stuck around longer, then others could have been infected and embedded and whatever. So you take that next step. Okay, well, what happens if they put a colony there? What happens if they were to send people out? And it makes total sense that we've lost contact with them, and we go in and we find, oh, there's a nest.
Yes.
And the arachnophobia type of thing kind of starts to come in, because you have everybody's webbed up and cocooned and that sort of thing. So you have this body horror aspect of it as well.
And even if you try to kill them, you could still die from trying to kill them because they're acid blood.
Yeah,
that's a very fearful thing. And then I think I was about to say another aspect to it, like with the in the first one when they had that giant skeleton with the chest open, pretty much. I assumed that is where the queen came out of, but apparently that's totally separate or something. But I thought that would have made sense to have a giant alien if they could get a face hugger in a giant or something, have a giant alien come out. But somebody says that's totally different, totally separated. But
that alien there in the ship, the one they find at the beginning, the thing, you have a hint. It's one of those things where really the only purpose that it serves is to establish there's going to be something very, very bad about to happen.
Yes.
And it's one of those things where like, we should probably leave.
Yes.
Now.
Especially when you see something of that size that's killed. And it wasn't like dead out at like a huge gun thing?
Yes.
Like it was like a turret basically and dead. It's like
and it was one of those things where get out now.
Mm-hmm. But they just had the curiosity a little, or was it specifically because they were sent there to look for something specific? Or?
They were responding to a signal, and the directive was, okay, well, if we have some kind of contact with people with something, then whatever it is, we need to go look.
Yeah,
and that's how the thing starts. Is they get awakened out of hypersleep because they pick up a signal.
They got the thing. I didn't know if their mission was to pick up the eggs or if it was to listen to find wherever the signal came from.
It was just going to find what the signal came from. And Ash was the one who had the side mission directive that if they ever came across anything that could possibly be weaponized, then and that's a very broad criteria.
That's an interesting thing. A pencil can be weaponized.
Yeah. Any kind of new technology or alien technology or anything that we can turn into a weapon. And so that broad instruction is how you get into that thing where Ash is like, well, okay, there's an alien here. We should stay and find out what happens when the alien comes on the ship.
Yeah. So like, see, when I say alien isn't as like, I don't like it as much, I give it like a 6 or 7 out of 10 kind of a thing. Meaning it's above average, but like, I don't know. I guess that's because just my enjoyment level for the first one was like that. And it's like, I'm trying to figure out how to rate some of this stuff because, again, like I'm looking at it now and like when I saw Jaws for the first time, I know that I've seen like all the schlock shark movies first, which aren't impressive at all to me, really. The Jaws was probably the first one that I saw that I'm like, I'm interested in what's happening to what's going on here as a shark movie, even though I know all the tropes about it and everything before I saw it. Like that one I came in knowing like most of what happens. But one thing that surprised me that I liked about it was that they killed a kid. And I was like, okay, when you kill a kid, that means like no one's really safe in this film.
Right.
When that can happen. Right. Your main character, and they kind of did take out one of the main characters, and it's like, you can die in this.
The other thing, and it's funny you mentioned, you've seen all of the others that came after that, the Sharknadoes and the Megs and whatever.
all these shark ones, yeah. Well,
the problem, well, I don't want to say a problem. The challenge with you young'uns, it's one of those things where, and this is something that we've talked about on our shows on occasion, is for whatever reason the young generations have a tendency to ignore, neglect, forget. They don't care that much about anything that happened prior to the year they were born. And this sense of history, and it's everything, not just entertainment, but in
general, most people
politics and economics and everything else.
Yeah.
But then you have this idea, and John Carter ran into this because John Carter was not marketed properly.
The one where he goes to Mars and
Right.
Yeah,
Because John Carter, everybody looks at it and they go, oh, well, they're ripping off Star Wars. Well, without John Carter, there would be no Star Wars. John Carter came first.
Well, wasn't it a book that was one of the ones that kind of inspired?
Well, yeah, because John Carter inspired all of it. John Carter inspired Star Wars, inspired Superman, inspired Star Trek, inspired Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers.
Yeah.
All of it came from John Carter. John Carter was the first. The Barsoom novels from Edgar Rice Burroughs was the beginning of all of that. And when that movie was made, the Disney executives who had greenlit it were all gone. So the people who had it didn't care about it, so it didn't get marketed properly. And it basically just kind of ka-thunk at the box office, and nobody did. There's a book that talks about it. It's called John Carter and the Gods of Hollywood. And it talks about this long, convoluted
history. You say it's a documentary? You say it's a documentary or
it's a book? It's a book. Okay. But it's not just about that particular production of John Carter. It's about every single time they've ever tried to make the attempt and failed.
Right.
Because Hollywood sits there and goes, I don't get it.
Right.
So,
see, John Carter's an interesting one. I want to rewatch that again one of these days, because when I first saw it, see, my thoughts weren't it's ripping off Star Wars. My thoughts were I'm hoping that this cool space movie, is pretty good. But I hated John. I hated the character. He just seems to scream and leap around and just like I don't know. It just seemed really weird to me. I was like, okay, I don't really like this character. The green aliens, like, okay,
that's the book.
The whole conflict just seemed so underwhelming to me. I don't know.
Okay, you should read the novels. You should read the Barsoom novels. To start with, The Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. That's the majority of what that movie was based on. And
would you say it was a good adaptation from the book?
Yeah, I do. I think it's probably one of the more faithful adaptations you would get. Now, it does mix in some things from the second book. But for the most part, it's a pretty solid. Now, there's a lot of stuff in the book that didn't make it into the movie, of course, because that's how it always is.
Typically, of course.
But for the most part, the main idea thread of the story, it's a pretty solid adaptation. But the book's much better, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because there's more to it.
I mean, I don't know, just the movie, it felt so schlocky to me, I guess. I don't know. Even if it was based on a first, I don't know.
Well, you've also got to remember that book came out in the 1920.
Well,
something
I guess
like that.
Like how I see it, like apparently Jumanji was based off of a book. I had no idea. Like I'm just looking at them as a movie, just in general, like regardless if they're an adaptation from something. And I just think, I don't know, John Carter could have been better. I feel like there's some tweaks that could have made it more interesting.
It could have been, but a lot of it, excuse me, a lot of it too was the fact that you have a director who's been in animation all this time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is his first live action picture. So you've got that going too. But he's also fighting the studio throughout the entire process, because the people who said, okay, yeah, we'll make it, all were fired at some point, and you've got the new people that didn't want to have anything to do with it, didn't want to be making it, didn't care about it, didn't want to give them the money to finish it.
A lot of people working on it didn't want to work on it, essentially.
Well, it wasn't the people that were working on it, it was the studio executives. Because the studio executives had the turnover. The people at Disney, the people in the corporate offices of Disney, your vice presidents and your executives and stuff. And they didn't understand what this thing was. They didn't know what it was. They didn't care about it. They hated the idea of doing it because the guy that greenlit it got fired. Yeah. And we don't want to have anything to do with anything that he had, because if it's a success, then he'll get the credit.
Right.
And yeah, Daytona Falls is right. If Carter had taken off, there would have been more. There was a whole series planned out because they were going to do all of the Barsoom stories.
Do you think it would have been the kind of series that, if the first one in film form seemed a little wonky, that the sequels could have bolster it altogether?
When you say wonky, that's, to me. See, and I guess it's a difference of perspective. I don't know if it has to do with age or whatever, but to me, John Carter was wonky only in how it was marketed.
Yeah, I guess I'm just referring to like the character of him. I don't like him at all. He just seems like not worth rooting for at all. I'm just like, I hate this guy. Don't like watching him. He's like an asshole. I don't know. I didn't like the guy.
He hates himself.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to be dead. The whole thing about that character is, family's dead. He's come back from the war, which he's on the losing side of the war. His house has been burned to the ground. His wife and kid is dead. He doesn't have any reason to live anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And gets caught up in this, he gets recruited and the army says, we want you to go out and scout. And he's like, I don't want to have anything to do with any of you. And ends up on Mars by accident, happenstance. And he still doesn't want to have anything to do with any of this stuff. When he sits there and he goes, I'm not going to fight your war. Okay, fine. I've got superpowers. What does it mean to me? I don't know who any of you guys are. So it's that progression of everybody hates him. He hates himself. He wants to be dead. He doesn't have any purpose. And that film is him finding a new purpose and becoming John Carter of Mars and living out the rest of his life with Dejah Thoris. Because now he's got a reason to be alive. He's got a purpose. He's got a reason to fight. To save the girl.
Yeah, I'll have to watch it again to see if I follow that, I suppose. I'm not remembering the details to that. What year did it come out?
John Carter came out
like 2009 or something.
To the interweb.
I want to say 2009, but I don't remember.
It was 2012.
2012. Okay, wow, more recent than I thought. All right, yeah, I'll give that another check one of these days, I suppose.
Yeah. But anyway, Citizen Kane.
I was actually going off of that. We're going somewhere with that, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're talking about Jaws earlier, and you're talking about a lot of people these days don't like to look back prior to when they were born, essentially.
Right.
What you're talking about.
When you talk about all of these different films that have done these things, and you look at something like John Carter, you look at something like Sharknado, for example, or Meg or whatever, and we have this tendency to forget there was a first. To forget Jaws was the first of its kind. Halloween was the first of its kind. Alien was the first of its kind. Star Wars wasn't the first of its kind, but it revived an entire style of filmmaking that had not been seen since the 1940s.
Yeah, restored a dry well, essentially.
Yeah, essentially. And not only that, but it also rejuvenated the idea of science fiction, because prior to that, all we had was 2001. And 2001 is this long, very slow, very cerebral thing.
That's not high on my list, but I do want to see it at some point.
You haven't seen it?
I feel like I got to be in the right mindset to see it.
Okay.
You know.
You're gonna be a filmmaker. You gotta watch some of this stuff because these
I
are
know.
essentials.
Well, I will like okay. So like the list of ones that I gotta watch are like over hundreds. Like
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing too.
Yeah.
I've only been interested in film for like 5 years. So like I'm 27, only 5 years. I didn't grow up watching the majority of the ones that everybody else seems to have seen. Like so
Yeah.
I'm like I got a lot of. I'm trying to learn about making film as well as watching films that have come before. So it's
Now, are
a
you
long
studying?
process.
Are you studying filmmaking in school?
Not right now because my college doesn't have any film studies classes. I'm in the Northwest, and the only one that we had was Intro to Cinema, and I took it,
Yep.
and that was it. Like that was the only one, and that barely touched on basics. And we did watch some films. Like I watched Being John Malkovich. We watched The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, which I'm glad I saw that. Big Lebowski. Tim Popo, a couple other odd ones that Tim Popo was actually surprisingly good foreign film.
Yeah.
Just a comedy about noodles. That's actually hilarious.
when you go through these things, Citizen Kane being one of them, but you also should be looking at foreign films.
Yeah, I agree.
Battleship Potemkin comes to mind. It's a Russian film. As much as I hesitate to recommend Fellini, anything by Fellini should be in your viewing list as well. Federico Fellini, because he is he's a very strong influence in a lot of modern filmmakers.
What films has he done?
The one that I saw was 8.5. It's a very odd stream of consciousness. It's basically about a guy who's essentially losing his mind, and pieces of the film you don't know whether or not this is actually happening or if it's happening in his head.
Okay.
I didn't enjoy it, but I can appreciate it. Let me say it
that's what I feel like a lot of films that I see might end up being, and that's because, like, I know you're like I can appreciate firsts, but I think that sometimes people, I don't know, sometimes they have just a bias with it being the first that they've seen and stick to that being the best sometimes, and that they don't think it could get better, or that sometimes it doesn't get better. Now, I'd say in most cases, it doesn't get better. In most cases, they have not done a good job at doing better. Like Terminator, for example, now they've done crappy. But there's just some stuff I think they do improve, or at least continue the same level of quality. But
the other thing you have to remember too, though, is that prior to the 1970s, essentially, really, sequels weren't a thing.
Right.
Trilogies, series, the whole,
cinematic here's a movie, hope you enjoy it.
Here's a movie, hope you enjoy it. And these studios will be cranking out 20 or 30 films a year.
Well, and they didn't, this is something I don't hear mentioned as often, but I'm sure most people know without talking about it. Like, those mostly went just to the theater, right? That was a theater whenever that was on. And then
that
TV,
was it.
Then when TVs were coming around, like, sometimes they would play it like once a year or something, like
no, they didn't even do that. Cinema movies were in the cinema, and TV was in the beginning. You had variety shows. You had stuff like George Burns and you had the early Tonight Show. You had the Jack Parr Show. You had Jack Benny. You had Milton Berle. You had Ed Sullivan and all of that. But the 1950s, television was essentially, let's do plays on stage and throw the cameras in front of it. And there wasn't a whole lot of production value. It was because they did it live a lot of times, which means mistakes and everything. You watch some of the early Doctor Who, it was the same kind of thing. They taped it, and it was it, and that was what they got.
Yeah.
And, these kinescopes that they've got, which is pretty much the only record that we have of some of these shows, they didn't have videotape. They didn't have any way of recording a lot of these things in any form of high fidelity. And when television came around, a lot of people were worried that it was going to kill off the movie theaters. And it didn't, but there was that separation. Movies were shown in the movie theater, and movies were not shown on television. They didn't have television deals until much later. Television was for TV shows, and because you go to the movie theaters, after Wizard of Oz, in the late 1930s is when Technicolor was introduced. You had these full color blasts of visual, and television was all black and white.
Okay.
So you couldn't do any of that. I mean, TV, we didn't get color in TV until the 60s.
I guess where I was going with that, I suppose, was that when they eventually did have movies on TV later, right? Mm-hmm. And then when people could take when they could take the movie home with VHS and everything, as time was going forward and people can watch movies more frequently, or it was more common to go and see a movie and people have more access to watch them repeatedly.
Right.
Then I assumed that the way that they made films started to change as well, because it wasn't just let's film what we got and just put it out there and we're done. It was okay, well now there's repeat viewings. Now there's people looking at it. I assume that there was some type of transition in how one would go about making a film.
You have an evolution in the storytelling styles, sure, because you can do editing and you can do that sort of thing. And as technology improves, the storytelling does that. But even as far back as the 30s, they were telling narratives that you'd rehearse it, you'd shoot it. I mean, television was where you were getting what you got. And you're on a stage, and you basically do the thing in real time, in order, and just like a play. Movies never did that. Movies were not like that in all the way back when they introduced sound. There was always some kind of editing. Now, the very, 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 very beginnings, there may have been less of that, because you just crank the camera and you record what they did. Because back in the early days when Hollywood first started, when it was Hollywood land, and they first started out in California, the reason they got out in California because they could get sunlight, because they shot all these things outside. And even if you're inside the cabin, as it were, you're only three walls, and the camera was set, and the camera sat there, and it didn't move. Mm-hmm. And you just cranked the camera, and everybody did their action and their scene inside the set. Yep. And Hollywood, originally, you had, since it was silent, you wouldn't have to worry about noise. They would have a whole row of these sets. So you'd have, Charlie Chaplin doing this one, and Buster Keaton in here, and Lillian Gish here, and this one here, and this one here. And you'd have this whole row of films being cranked and made all at the same time. Mm-hmm. And they'd be shooting them simultaneously. Past that, when you started to get into editing and narrative stories and all of that, then you get that started late 20s, early 30s, and from there on it was always let's shoot, we cut it together, and we edit, and we put together this narrative story. Television is where it was less. You were less able to do that in the beginning because of the way the technology was. Okay,
that makes sense. So did you, just curious, did you study this out of interest in the hobby, or did you go to school and learn some of this?
I studied communications. I have been now 33 years in media. I started in college radio when I was 18, and then I saw Lawrence of Arabia in the movie theater and decided I wanted to make movies. So I've studied that. I've been radio, television, motion pictures, magazines, web design. I've done a little bit of all of it. So.
Wow, nice.
I'm old.
Very good. That's good. You got a lot of experience under your belt with that and a lot of stuff to share. So that's good.
A little. Yeah.
That's good. Well, I guess
let me do this one thing. I got a tickle in my throat. Let me go grab a drink real quick, and I'll be right back if that's okay. All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
And you can talk amongst yourselves.
Yep, no problem. How's everybody in the chat doing? I know that the title of the stream is about Citizen Kane, which we did talk about quite a bit, and we keep on going back to it a little bit throughout. But I feel like the subject of it, based on me being the rookie critic and haven't seen a lot of these films in general, I think that it's a good bouncing point into other discussions like we're doing right now, which is very interesting. I like in our discussion here, we're learning quite a bit, and this is going pretty awesome. Yeah, Ancient One says, "Don't worry, Tommy. We'll get the Expendables team safe squad. The guinea pigs will go the way to the theater, totally." And hello, Karen. Thanks for joining. Yeah, we're talking Citizen Kane, talking other films, kind of going through history a little bit. This guy knows a lot about the film history. That's for dang sure. This is fun listening to and having this discussion with, which I do have a question for you based when you tell me that you worked with it. So has there been cases where you thought that the sequel, I guess since sequels have been a thing, that a sequel did it better than its original?
The Empire Strikes Back.
Other than that, that's the almost go-to for everything.
Star Trek II also is one of those. I think you could make the argument that you could probably make the argument that Aliens might be better than Alien, except they're completely different genre films.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people do go back and forth on which one's better or worse. Essentially,
so you don't really have two of the same movie,
right?
And you get into the things like the Halloween pictures or the Friday the 13th movies or anything like that, and with a lot of people, your answer to that question is going to be different. I think Star Wars versus Empire Strikes Back, the reason why so many people say that The Empire Strikes Back is better is because it is the Act 2. It's the darker moments where things aren't going too well for our heroes.
The heroes have to go the uphill climb. They're struggling throughout. They're learning a lot.
Right.
The villains are in their elements.
When you're going through a 3-act play, Act 1 is the introduction of all of your characters and your scenario and your scene and whatever. Act 2 is where it all falls apart.
Yeah.
And Act 2 is where, it's dark and your hero going to survive, and then you have Act 3, which is the big climactic finish, and the denouement, as they call it, and the big ending.
Typically, the hero's winning in the end. With those.
Yeah.
So I guess I will definitely need to come up with a better example for what I'm about to say, because an example of something that was first being not the best. Okay. I'll say, growing up, I grew up with Power Rangers. And everybody that grew up with it usually just says, Mighty Morphin was, that was the first one adapted from Sentai and stuff in America. They say Mighty Morphin's the best one, and Tommy Oliver, the Green Ranger, that's everybody's favorite, sure. But, they say that's the best one. And I've seen a lot of the other seasons after, and I'm like, as not even close to the best. It's the starting point, sure. We might not have gotten the others if it wasn't for it, but in terms of its quality, not just talking about its effects, I'm talking about its story elements, the villains, characters, is pathetic. Because there's other ones that start with the good guy pretty much has won. It's already in the very first episode, but then the villain kills them. And then the characters are kind of taking it a little seriously. Yes, they have their corny humor in it too, but they're taking moments seriously, and they have the like a villains go through arcs. One where he's like, he hates humans the whole time, and then is like presented with he almost hurts his daughter, which is somebody he does care about, and then like she was trying to protect a human baby, and it's like this isn't a Power Rangers goofy thing, and they did concepts way more than Mighty Morphin ever did. It's like the quality improved in some of its other seasons. Like
part of that is when you introduce stakes, when you introduce danger and threat, and like you were saying with Jaws, when they killed the kid, now we know anybody is fair game. And when you introduce that, and The Empire Strikes Back is a good example of this. Everybody loses. Luke Skywalker loses a hand, and he finds out that the villain of the piece is his father, and he's devastated.
Yeah.
And he loses his connection to Obi-Wan. He doesn't get Obi-Wan's help. Han Solo is frozen in carbonite. We don't know if he's going to survive. All of this stuff is going badly for our heroes. And when it gets more of a threat, when it gets more of a question of whether or not the good guys are going to win, Power Rangers is the same thing. It gets darker. You have this arc that they go through, but they also have to struggle. The win doesn't just automatically come just because they've got power.
Right.
And something that J.J. Abrams needs to learn.
Yes. It's funny that you mentioned that, because like there's even a season that I thought looked kind of stupid, but like then I actually watched it, and it's like it's basically these last of their ninjas basically, and the leader of them is actually the least skilled in that area, but he's got other aspects that put him as the leader, I suppose, like more courage to go face something when the odds are against you. And throughout the show, it's about like a lot of it is about learning martial arts essentially, which is something that they don't typically do in Power Rangers. They don't really learn how to do it. They just have power and they can fight. But in that one, they show them struggling to use their weapons, struggling to adjust to some of their power that they can output. And it was like I liked that they're doing that, because in the other ones, they just we do it and we fight. Whew, okay, next monster next week. And it's like, I don't know, I can't watch that constantly because that gets really dull. So you can't. No.
And you look at some of the other shows from that time period, and we'd say Tom Baker is the best Doctor. Well, Tom Baker is the best Doctor because he was the first one we got. And there are some people, their first Doctor was Peter Davison, the fifth Doctor.
Yeah.
You hear David Tennant talk. When David Tennant was, who played the 10th Doctor, when he was growing up, his Doctor was the 5th Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So not everybody latches on to Tom Baker. There are people who favor Pertwee. There are people who like Sylvester McCoy and that. And it's this idea of your first impression sometimes skews things. But you go back and you look at something like the Transformers cartoon. There were stakes in that. I mean, Optimus Prime died.
Yeah,
he's the main character, and this is a show for kids.
Yes, that's what makes it. That's what makes it good in a way. It's like it makes a kid be able to attach, but that's I say that's less. Because I don't know. I guess I know where I'm going with that necessarily, but I see what you're saying too. That was of its first kind, right? With
pretty much
that show back then.
Yeah. Now, well, I mean, you had Transformers, you had G.I. Joe, you had Power Rangers, you had a lot of these shows. Now, Power Rangers wasn't one of them, but a lot of these shows were meant to sell toys. Masters of the Universe, He-Man, and all of that.
Right.
You have Power Rangers was part of this beginning of Japanese programming making its way into the United States. You had Power Rangers, you have Ultraman, you had Godzilla, of course, from the 50s, and then you had on the animated side, you had the anime, you had Robotech, you had
Dragon Balls coming in, Sailor Moon.
Well, but even before that, you had Star Blazers, you had Battle of the Planets, you had
I haven't heard of them. I haven't heard of those ones. I'm gonna look that one up. Star Blazers. That's an interesting title for it.
Star Blazers is based on it's an anime in Japan called Space Battleship Yamato, or Yamato, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And essentially, what it is, and Star Blazers was the American dubbed version of Space Battleship Yamato, and they had to rename the ship. The Argo is what it was called on Star Blazers, but the Yamato, it was an actual ship that was part of the Japanese Navy during World War II, and it's got a very storied history, and the culture of
the ship
Japan,
right here.
That's it. And basically, what it is there is an alien race that has bombarded Earth with radioactive meteors, and they put together, they rebuild, they resurrect the battleship Yamato out of the Japanese Navy, and they turn it into a spaceship because they've gotten a signal from this planet way out in the other side of the galaxy that can turn the radiation around, can save the planet. We can save our people. And so that was the show. And Space Battleship Yamato, the Japanese series, has gone on for years. Multiple movies, multiple series. Then they got rebooted in, you got Yamato 2199, which has been redone as Star Blazers 2199, which is basically retelling the story again, but they've updated and modernized the animation and all of this. But Star Blazers was one of those shows that was formative for a lot of us. You had Star Blazers, you had Battle of the Planets, which was also based on a Japanese anime called Team Ninja Gatchaman, Science Ninja Gatchaman. And it's been over here a couple of different forms. Battle of the Planets was first, and then it was redone as G-Force. And basically what they would do is they'd take the Gatchaman anime and they'd cut it together and they'd put English dialogue and they'd basically create brand new stories out of whole cloth, editing all of this stuff. But yeah, and Tommy's right. You had Voltron after that. You had Robotech in that time period as well.
I'm going to check out Star Blazers. That's on
Star Blazers is
on Funimation. I can watch that.
Star Blazers is good stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to check that out. It looks good. That's from the 70s, you said? Or?
It is from the 70s. And then a few years ago, they did a live action adaptation of it.
Really?
And it is probably one of the best animated to live action conversions that I've seen with anything. Because it was in 2010 they did the live action version of it. And the last 20 minutes of it kind of starts to hang on, but for the most part it's an excellent adaptation of the anime. Space Battleship Yamato from 2010. And one thing that gets me is how well the costumes translate to live action. They really nailed the design of this stuff. It's an excellent piece of work.
That looks good. Yeah, it seems like very similar to Super Sentai-ish as far as the aesthetic. I don't know, their outfits, I suppose. Yeah. Just by that alone. But yeah, I'm gonna check this out, man. This looks all right.
Yeah, it's a really good film. But the series is well worth your time.
Yeah, I'm adding that to my list.
And this is all of those things where if you're getting into making films and you're doing storytelling and filmmaking and what we're going to do, you take bits and pieces from everything. You take from the slasher pictures, and you take from the anime, and you take from Star Wars, and you take from Star Trek, and you take from Battlestar Galactica, and you take from, studies of faith. Battlestar Galactica is based a lot on Glenn Larson's Mormon faith. Any kind of story element can come from anywhere. The bum that lives under the bridge. All of those things.
Yeah.
And so you just take in everything that you can take in and just synthesize it into whatever your filmmaking style ends up being, and that's going to be something that evolves throughout your career.
Yeah, that's already a thing, actually. Like, I started by trying to film skits as part of reviews, kind of inspired at first, when I first started my channel, by the Nostalgia Critic. Like, I don't really look up to that now, but, it was at least something I could do in my house, essentially. Yeah. I could just with the camera and try to do something, have a focus, and I have, cut away 2 different characters that I'd play as at the same time, essentially. So I've got, like, multiple characters like played and tried to splice together to be as if they're interacting in one film. And right. It's obviously like a little corny, wonky with the style, but like that's what it is. That's what I'm known for at the moment. And then I tried stop motion a little bit with tomatoes, like making fun of Rotten Tomatoes a bit. And I'd put like little, the little swords that go into drinks or whatever.
Oh, right, right.
Those, yeah. I'd have those on there as like lightsaber swords and little Star Wars guns attached to them. The little the little table things and pizzas, I painted them, made them little shields.
Yep.
Like flags and all that.
So what part of the country are you in? Where are you located?
I'm in the Northwest America.
Okay. I would do a search and see. We have. I'm in Kansas City. We have a group here. It's a networking group called the Filmmakers Coalition of Independent Filmmakers Coalition of Kansas City, and basically it's a networking group. People who are studying film, whether they're studying it professionally or if they want to just do it as a hobby or do it for fun.
Yeah.
But I would look for a group like that in and around your area, but I would also look for the 48-hour film project.
48-hour film project?
48-hour film project, 48-hour film challenge. Basically what it is, it's a timed competition where you get a group put together and they give you 3 elements. This line, this prop, this piece of wardrobe or whatever.
Oh, I see. Yeah, a few things to try to put in your film and then you utilize it however you can.
Yeah, and you have 48 hours to finish it and screen it. And
wow.
Those are some really good just dive in and see what you can do type of experiences. And depending on the level of expertise that everybody has in the group, it's a very good learning experience because you really figure out what you know and what you need to know and what other people know. And you start networking and building your group together of the people that you can sit there and say, this is my tribe. This is yes. All of the people that are going to be together.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of improv. You can write your script. You can make it up as you go. It's basically you get there that morning and here's your stuff, and then you've got all that day, all the next day, and then they screen it like say you start on Friday and you screen it Saturday night. It's an absolutely crazy experience, but it's well worth the time, especially if you're first starting out.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I've got that saved on a tab now, so I can look that up later and see where I can find that. I think Seattle's probably the closest one to me in my area, but right now I have a problem with making things shorter because I tend to make things longer, and I know that especially when you're smaller, people want to see something quicker. I guess they don't want to sit through a longer thing. They want to sit through something get grabbed quickly and it be done. And that's something I struggle at right now because I keep on making them over 10 minutes long, and sometimes I need to have like a 5-minute goal.
There's nothing wrong with doing something 10 minutes. There's nothing wrong with doing something 15 minutes, as long as everything that's in there has to be in there.
Yeah,
if
that's
it's in there for a reason.
That's something I'm learning more about as far as when I'm writing a script, especially. I'm really trying to go, okay, does this really need to be in there? What is this doing? If I can have more layered meaning in what's happening, then that's better. But there was a period for about 6 months where I didn't really accomplish anything because I was trying to make it as perfect as I can with that. But that was a problem because I had that issue before when I didn't know that much about writing. I was just trying to write all this stuff. But then I was like, okay, I need to just, get in the concept of I'm going to put out a video. I just got to write something, film it, and go. Don't worry about how it is too much. Just get something going so I can get it done short and then improve the style as I go. And I did. I actually was getting better at writing shorter stuff. Even if I took my time a little bit, it would be like a 15-page script or something and be done. And that was it. I was satisfied, good. And then at some point, I was like, just second guessing. I'm like, okay, this can't be done because this needs to be better. This has to happen. Something has to happen here. And then I pretty much didn't accomplish anything for 6 months. And I was like, I just threw that all in the trash. It was like, I got to start fresh.
There are plenty of places online where you can get copies of scripts. And I'm going to give you a recommendation of a couple of different books.
Okay. I got a tab up here so I can look those up.
Rebel Without a Crew from Robert Rodriguez. And Story by Robert McKee. And then also The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. Those 3 books. There's also, you could also study Flannery O'Connor, who's a well-regarded writer, who's written a number of things about writing. Ray Bradbury's done a book, so there's different things. But I would start there. I would start with the McKee book, because that is a master class in story structure, in the construction of the character arcs and setting and all of that. All of the elements of what makes a good story is in that book. It's a massive book, but it's an excellent. It's college level, all in one book.
Okay.
It's very good resource, especially for writers.
Yeah, I'd say that's actually the one aspect. Like, if I want to be a director, the writing aspect is the one thing I want to have nailed the most. Like, that's one that I want to have the most.
And you want to be you want to have some experience as an editor.
That's something I do quite a bit lately. I've been learning a lot, actually, with the way that I've been filming. I've been trying to learn different editing tricks and ways to do that better as well.
Editing gives you a sense of pace, gives you a sense of the timing.
Yep.
It also, as a director or a cinematographer, for example, either of those, the more setups, the more different types of shots that you have, the more choices the editor has, you're going to be the editor's best friend if you give them a lot of stuff to work with.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just shoot that one thing and that's all you have, then what do you do? But yeah, I would also edit. I would also besides writing, if directing is what you want to do, I would also edit. I would also assistant direct.
Yeah, I've got to learn how to work. I got to learn how to work more with people, because as far as in person, I've been my own crew. Essentially, I haven't had to tell somebody else what I want and have them do it. And that's something I know a lot of directors have to, can you trust them to do something? Can you also properly explain what you want them to do and have them do it right, essentially? Can you do that?
And there's a lot of communication, a lot of planning, especially when you start getting into bigger crews and bigger projects. The more planning you get in there at the beginning, the more communication, the more paperwork and plans and lists and sketches and whatever else, the easier it's going to be when you get on set and actually start shooting.
I agree.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, thanks to Ancient One for putting our link out there. That's nice to.
Yeah, he's a great mod. He mods for a lot of people. He's right on to the posting with everything, keeping everything in check. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, he does great with that. Yeah, we'll be wrapping it up here shortly. This has been a great conversation, man. I love this kind of talk, and especially with people that have a lot of experience, because a lot of people thought it was kind of weird that like I want to be a director and I also have a YouTube channel. Like they think a lot of people have said that I should just not ever do YouTube, just specifically focus on film. And it's like I want to be a director, but I'm also not in a position where I could focus on it right now, like especially where I live. Like, and honestly, I'm having fun the way that I'm doing this here. I'm able to interact with a lot of people. I'm watching a lot of films and discussing them with people and gaining different perspective on learning different things in different ways. And with the stuff that I do film, I do put out on my channel, and I can get feedback. And I've also had done lots of collaborations with people. In some ways, I've tried to have people send me clips of some kind to intertwine into things. I've had people voice stuff for stop motion, and I'm learning a lot on how to communicate what I want with that kind of stuff too. So
I would also be open to watching some documentaries every now and again, because
I do like documentaries for the most part. So
the production design of documentaries is much different from a Hollywood narrative. A lot of times, your camera setups are different. Your pace is different. The kinds of stories they tell, and that kind of thing. But yeah, that gives you a sense, because you're also in a documentary. You're also telling a story. You also have to build that narrative.
Yeah.
Of whatever it is that you want to do with that, whether you're trying to expose wrongdoing and corruption, or if you're just telling, like Ken Burns doing the Civil War stuff, or baseball. But yeah, it's the same kind of thing where you have to decide where are those nuggets, and you have to build the spine of your story, and then that's where your note cards are, and what's our path, and how do we get from here to here.
Yeah, I learned something last year. I filmed the stop motion project called the Tomato Wars, where by now, a lot of people have seen the tomato videos I've made. They enjoyed the aspect because they have no limbs, no hands, no eyes, and I give them little voices, and they end up usually getting slaughtered and killed in some way at the end. Kind of funny with it, but I decided to try to utilize everything that I could up to that point, and I had my green screen for the first time, and I learned with editing with that I can't just select all of the pictures and chroma key them. I have to individually select each picture to chroma key out the background. I was like, oh my God. And in that whole project, I took 16,000 pictures. And with editing, it's a big thing here. And when I'm looking back at it, I realized that, man, I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to do, but a lot of it could have been better if I didn't do it the way I did. I tried to have more jokes or something, but it wasn't that funny because it's just lingering. They're tomatoes. I gotta be. If there's supposed to be a point, or there's a point where there's two characters talking, like a more sensei character and a youngster, but they're talking for 2 minutes, and they're tomatoes. It's that is jarring even for me as I was watching it. I'm 30 seconds in, or can we do something else a little bit here, because we're just having this and it doesn't work for this to do that. So I would suggest
study the scripts of Neil Simon. The Odd Couple is probably the most famous of all of his, but his approach to comedy, he had a formula, and it really works, and it works for comedy and it works for horror. And he uses a rule of 3. He basically is, here's the line, here's the joke, and the third time, it's always got a twist on the other 2 times that you've done it.
Right.
And with comedy and horror have the same structure. You have the tension, you have the build up, you have the in comedy it's the setup for the joke. In horror it's the tension that builds up and that. Then you have the payoff, you have the punchline, or you have the jump scare.
Right.
And then you have the release. You have the recovery of those things.
Yeah.
And the emotional beats are the same, whether it's comedy or horror. But I would look at Neil Simon as well, and some of the stuff that he wrote, because that does that same kind of thing. Like what you're talking about is, making sure that the jokes are paced enough that they actually land.
Yeah.
And you're not just throwing one out after the other, after the other, after the other, because if you overwhelm the audience, then they're not going to enjoy any of it.
Yeah, that was the main thing, was that there's a lot of dialogue that I put in it, and a lot of the dialogue doesn't really do anything for anything. And I'm like, man, I really, really wish, because I still liked, because I was parodying Star Wars with it essentially, but also the tomatoes are in their own little drama of stuff going on. But it's just. When I'm watching them, the total amount of time between the 6 episodes is 50 minutes, and it's you feel it, and I can barely watch them. And each little episode is almost very similar. They're very similar in what happens. They get one gets picked off in some way, and then they fight back, and then the one loses it. He's learning a little more throughout this, and then he beats them all essentially. And it's I can't believe I wrote them like that. Why did I do that? I think that works for once, but I did that many times, and it's I can't believe I wrote that. And then, but there was other things that I was doing first, like I said, using the tomatoes on a green screen first, and then I only used that for one scene. But then I was filming in different locations around my house and yard, essentially trying to have different areas, and I only have a camcorder with it, just one. And I didn't realize as much about how much lighting I should consider with it, because there's a lot that have shadows. There's some bits where my finger is at the very corner of the frame that I didn't realize until way later that that I pressed the button before it was fully out of shot. And it's man, there's a lot of things that I learned from that too. And so if I were to do one again, my approach is going to be very different. I will try to have it be far shorter, but also make sure that even if it is longer, that there's the substance of what's going on. It's not a whole bunch of junk in between that it's funny, but
you can learn as much or more from your mistakes as you do from your successes. And when you're writing your script and you're coming up with your characters, one thing that you need to ask yourself about every single character in every single scene: what does he want?
Yeah.
Because that drives your narrative. What does the hero want? What does the girlfriend want? What does the best friend want? What does the villain want? What does this, hotel manager NPC want? It defines the behavior of those characters in those scenes. And when you have that, what does he want? And somebody else wants this other thing, and they come at odds to each other. Well,
how are they going to interact? What's going to happen? The other person that's in the room may not be important, but what are they doing if they're going to do anything here too? Sometimes those, play into it. I'll actually show you a small snippet from it here. So let's give it. The first part's kind of loud. I didn't have any other ships to use. I used those. Copying Star Wars, the first scene out of there with that. And
well, your green screen work is clean, at least.
Thank you. I feel like there's some parts that are a little wonky a bit. already. This scene is supposed to mirror the part where in Star Wars stormtroopers come in and bust on the rebels, but this is also kind of long. This took forever to edit. Holy crap. Like all the lasers, and it wasn't just, oh, they fire out. No, because when I cut to the next thing, they're supposed to be coming in and firing out. And it's like, oh my God. Like I was realizing that kind of stuff as I was editing. I did not think about before. And lining them up to come out where the guns are in stop motion was different.
Consider the fact that in the 1930s, when they were doing pew-pew ray guns, the way they did it was by physically scratching the film every single frame to move the laser beam across the frame, and then they'd go back in with a little color pen and stuff and color the laser. And that was done manually on every single frame of film, one at a time. So you didn't have to do that. So you're automatically ahead of the game there.
Yeah, it was tougher on them back in the day, that's for sure. But I created more issues for myself when I could have even made it easier. Essentially, is how I kind of see it. And
well, that happens. That happens. I mean, it's a learning process, especially if you're learning as you go. And you're self-taught, because that makes a huge difference, because you don't have somebody there with experience that you can draw from and sit there, okay, well, how do I do this? And somebody can explain it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then just one more scene here with this, which I was proud of, but I also feel like it's kind of pointless how long it drags. It's like, let's see here. So this shot, I made like a little tomato town, essentially. It's like, okay, already he sits here for a couple more seconds and then moves, but then like his little journey through this town is like 2 minutes, and there's nothing significant from it. It's just he's just going through the town, and I'm like, why did I do that? Like, I guess it's just because I could, but
well, and see, on this you could cut to a close up of your main character. And then you could chop out however much you need to chop out when he walks away from that gladiator scene, and that's where you start to trim.
Exactly. So. But yeah, at the time I was like, I filmed all this. I'm going to put all this in there, I guess, because it took 16,000 pictures and just put it in the majority of it.
You have to be willing to kill your darlings.
Yes, I agree. I wish I did now, because I'm looking at it and I'm like, I am going like, why did I have this here?
Learning process. Well, see, the thing about it is, though, now you've got something that you can cut from. You can actually cut it down and streamline it, and there's a way that you can start practicing your editing in terms of pace.
Yeah, true. But yeah, I will not make that mistake on the next one if I do. So, oh my gosh.
I would, and if you go back and even we bring it back full circle around to look at Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
If you look at a lot of the films that were made back then, the editing, the pacing of those films is going to be a lot different than what you've got in modern era films now. It's much more frenetic. It's much more, cut, boom, 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 no, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
The stuff in the 40s. Now, not everything was like that, but you look at something like a Casablanca or a Citizen Kane, and it's a little bit more sedate. It's a little bit more deliberate in its pace. But even with the comedy stuff, you look at Bringing Up Baby, for example. That's a really good one. It's a comedy, and it's cut with a little bit faster pace, but it's also very deliberate in the progression of that story. So,
right. I guess a good example, I guess, of a modern film that does something. What do you think of like the Cornetto trilogy, the Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, At World's End?
I haven't seen those. I've never been a big fan of horror films myself. So the zombie stuff and the apocalyptic things and all of that.
What's interesting, they're not. I would not even classify them as those types of films.
Well, they're horror comedies,
I suppose, but I mean, the way they do them, I think, is very, very interesting. Or okay, well then I'd recommend Hot Fuzz then, because that's not. They're police officers essentially. Right. There's no apocalypse type of thing there, but the way that they do it, a lot of the stuff with what they show on the camera and what they say and like what comes back later, like the way they do it for a modern film, I suppose, like is very well done, and like the way that they edit everything too. Is very just very good, and sometimes they do lots of cut things, but they do that deliberately for specific parts and then let other parts linger. And even though it's a comedy, there's parts where you kind of feel you're like, okay, what? Like this is like it's a comedy, sure, but this is also kind of like relatable. It's relatable parts that are like, wow, that kind of sucks.
The other thing too on editing, there are some directors, Nicholas Meyer's one, Leonard Nimoy was one, that make use of the insert shot. So basically, if you're doing this scene, people are talking, somebody's smoking a cigarette, somebody's drinking a scotch or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And one of them sits down and puts his cigarette in the ashtray. Well, an insert shot would be the close-up of the cigarette going into the ashtray. Just that real tight thing.
Yeah.
And, if somebody else sits down, he puts his drink on the table, you get an insert shot, you get a tight shot of the drink, him setting the drink on the table. Insert shots can sometimes save you in editing, because it gives you something to cut away from. The clock on the wall, the telephone. Right.
If the mic, the telephone camera or something, it's like you can cut. Okay, that part was a shot. Okay, cut to that.
Right.
I gotcha. It's a good idea. Yeah, that's also. I feel like, man, I feel like we could. I want to do a stream with you another time, because there's a lot that we could talk about. Honestly, it's gone way past Citizen Kane. Like, I like the aspect of a lot of things going wrong, like with Jaws and with other films, where it like you wonder if things went right, how would it have really gone? How would that film have been? Because sometimes the mistakes are what can make it good, and sometimes that kind of goes hand in hand with budget being a thing. Like, oh, there's millions and millions of dollars here, but I mean, sometimes the smaller budget one can do.
Yeah,
better.
If Bruce had worked, Jaws would not be the classic masterpiece, and it would not have survived as long as it has.
Yeah. I agree. It wouldn't be as referenced as it is. It'd just probably be a film that's like, that came out in that time, I guess. Okay.
Just another movie. So, but yeah, Citizen Kane is one of those that really does inform and influence so many others. Another one to look at is The Third Man. It's also a Orson Welles is in that one as well.
Okay.
It's a murder mystery of sorts, and it's got some really good camera work, editing. The writing, of course, is really solid, because it's a mystery. You're trying to figure out what happened to my friend. You've got this guy is coming into town to find out what happened, because his friend is dead. What happened to it? And it's an excellent film. Yep.
And you said that was The Third Man?
The Third Man. Yep.
Write that down. I've got a lot on my list, but I will add that to that one. Yeah, there's some films, I think, even that when I'm re-looking at my list of ones I want to watch, that I kind of move around, I guess, because there's some a lot of people want me to see, but some I do kind of want to catch before others. Well, I got it here. Some of them I feel like I got to be in a mood for, like 2001. Like I got to be like ready to sit down and watch that. A Clockwork Orange. I feel like I probably got to be in some type of mood to sit down and watch something.
Don't let the reputation of the film intimidate you into, oh, I have to be in a particular mindset. Sometimes you can psych yourself out because this is 2001.
Well, and I guess what I mean is like if I'm ready to, okay, yeah, I feel like, watching a movie and getting engaged, and then it's like slow, and then it's like, okay, really want to do something else now. Like if I'm ready to do that, I feel like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is one where I love it. I do kind of wish it was shorter, but I don't know if that would take away from it or not if it was shorter. But I'm glad that I sat through and watched it. But I did actually watch
The Magnificent Seven?
No.
Watch The Magnificent Seven. Yul Brynner, Robert Vaughn.
Has that one been remade, or is that? Or
no? Yeah, they've remade it several times. It actually is a remake itself. It is based on Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai.
Right, but I guess which version of this should I watch? Because
watch the one with Yul Brynner.
What year is that?
68, I think. Charles Bronson's in it.
Okay, I'll look for one of the older ones. Alrighty.
1960.
Alrighty, I shall take a look into that.
Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, Charles Bronson, Robert Vaughn. Again, this is another one of those films where you have so many different actors that are names, but they're in this movie before they were names.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, The Magnificent Seven is a good one. The Untouchables, The Great Escape.
Yep, I think a couple of those are somewhere on my list, a little further down, but yeah, those are on there. Indeed.
Yeah, there's a lot of it that you can do as far as, watch. In terms of a mindset, there's a couple of things. One, are you watching just to enjoy it? Because that's one mindset. If you're watching to study it, that's a different mindset. I would watch it first just to watch it, just to enjoy it. Don't try to get anything out of it. Just say, okay, well, I just want to experience this thing. What is it? And then, whether you like it or not, then after that is when you could get into your analysis. Because, like, somebody was talking earlier about, Star Wars. George Lucas made Star Wars because he couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
If you go back and look at Star Wars, or Raiders of the Lost Ark is probably the best example of this, because it's also based on the Saturday morning serials, of the 30s and 40s. You get every 10 minutes in that movie, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you could take Raiders of the Lost Ark and you could cut it into 10-minute segments, and you could serialize it and run it on Saturday mornings the way they did in the 30s. Star Wars the same way. It's not as clean, but every 10 minutes you have a story arc. Beginning, middle,
I see what you mean.
end.
They finish up where they are and they're about to go somewhere else. You could, cut now and be ready to anticipate what they do next week.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. For example, with the truck blows up and Marion's dead.
Right.
That's at the 10-minute mark.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'll have to rewatch Indiana Jones. It's been a long time since I watched them. From what I remember, I didn't like them, but I think that was because where I saw them at, I wasn't happy. Like, where I
can you
like,
not
I was
like?
I was at like my uncle's house or something, and I don't know. I think I wasn't in a good mood over there, and that was on. And it's
now
like
that does
getting
have an effect.
I wasn't getting invested at the time.
Yeah, that does have an effect, because the environment that you're in can have an impact. Because my son and I, he's been in a couple of times where I say, hey, let's watch a movie, and I'll pull out something that he doesn't have any interest in, and we'll sit and watch it. And for example, King Kong, he thought was pretty cool, but the first time he watched Buckaroo Banzai, he didn't get very much out of it. The second time he watched it, completely different set of circumstances, and he thought it was fine. So yeah, that can have an impact.
That's something I'm watching within my vacation here. Actually, Buckaroo Banzai. The ones that are on my list are ones that I haven't seen and ones that people recommended that I watch from a Twitter poll that I did a couple days ago. So Buckaroo Banzai is on there too.
Yeah. What else is on your list?
Let's see. I'll actually pull it up here because I have the list on here. Let's see. So the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, I think from 1993.
Oh, that's fun. That's a fun one.
I know I've seen bits of that one, but I don't remember it at all. And I've seen the show Angel, which was great. And I've seen bits of the Buffy show, but not all of it. So that one I'll enjoy. They Live has been recommended like a million times to me. Yeah. And that's surprising because I don't know much about it at all. Master and Commander, Buckaroo Banzai. Ford vs. Ferrari, which that one was recommended highly. I don't know if that's one of the classics now or anything modern classic.
I would say if you're going to do Ford versus Ferrari, and you could also look at in terms of James Mangold as a director, because he directed that one. You could also look at Logan, which is his Wolverine, old man Wolverine movie.
Taking that one, yeah.
Because James Mangold is doing the new Indiana Jones 5.
Okay.
So that would give you a little bit more of a sense of him as a director if you wanted to watch more than one film.
Definitely, yeah. I saw Logan. That one was pretty good. I have to watch it again. I only saw it when it was in theaters, which some of it was kind of mixed, but I did overall enjoy it. I think the weirdest part about that film was how often Logan passed out. It's kind of like 8 times, but that's as far as the only thing I didn't really like from what I remember. But other than that, it was really good. The actress, the kid, was pretty good for that. Let's see what else I got on here. I'm watching the Blade Runners. Those are ones that I, again, is like recommended as like super great. Like the hype for it is so high that I wonder if I'll really enjoy it. Like,
don't watch them back to back.
Don't watch them back to back.
Don't watch them back to back. Give it a little time between them. Let the first one simmer. And which cut are you going to watch?
Whichever ones are on HBO. So the only ones I have access to.
Because Blade Runner's got something like 3 or 4 different cuts. It's got a definitive cut. It's got a director's cut. It's got a theatrical cut. And depending on who you ask, one of them or the other is the cut you need to watch. So, but I would not watch them back to back. Give it a little time between the two.
Sure. If I like them, then maybe I'll watch another version of them too to see what that is. I saw Pig last night. Highly recommend that one. Again, slow pace. It's like, I think it's only an hour and it's like basically an hour and a half on it.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind should be on that list.
A lot of films should probably be on this list. That's 20 films for a reason. That's it. And I had people pick out which ones I'll see pretty much. So that's all good. The Raid films, which I've only heard have excellent fight scenes in them. I don't know anything else about them at all. Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. I think I've seen a little bit of King of Comedy either on TV or somewhere a little bit. Seems familiar-ish, but I don't remember really what happens other than like we're not sure if he really kidnapped the guy and did his thing or he's in jail and that made him famous. That's King of Comedy, right? I'm thinking.
I haven't seen that one. That's a De Niro movie, right?
Yeah, Robert De Niro.
Yeah. I would swap out the Raid 2 and put something else in there that's a little bit better of a mix, because I don't see that you got a whole lot of comedy there. or
Like
I don't see a whole-
I'll have like another list later.
Yeah.
I essentially have like a spiral list of films, but I just put out what people want me to watch because everybody knows I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I would trade the Raid 2 and put Apocalypse Now in there.
I might just have that be as another one to watch at some point. I guess I'm just gonna bust
the Raid
these
2
ones
is
out
essentially the Raid 2 is the Raid. I mean, you're basically getting the same kind of film, one right after the other. All of these other movies you've got here in this mix, it's a good mix, and none of them are the same. I mean, Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 are not anything close to being the same kind of movie either. The Raid and the Raid 2, I think you would probably be okay. I mean, yes, eventually get around to the Raid 2, but I would throw something else in there. I'd say Apocalypse Now would be a good one, or THX 1138.
Never heard of that one.
That's a head trip.
Yeah.
That's George Lucas's first film.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no, I have heard of that actually.
Robert Duvall. It's basically
it's like some science movie, right? Or some.
It's a dystopian future. Everybody has a number. Robert Duvall plays THX 1138. That's where the THX sound system came from.
Yeah. Okay. I might check that out then because I do like that.
Yeah.
Tommy says they have the extended cut on HBO.
Okay.
Is that a good cut?
Well, it depends on what you want to get out of it. I would say whichever one does not have the voiceover, because that's more the original vision that Ridley Scott had. The voiceover was added for the theatrical stuff because the suits figured nobody's going to understand.
Audience dumb, put this thing in.
Yeah.
I figure. I gotcha. But yeah, a lot of people compared Joker, the last of the DC one, to be ripping a lot off of King of Comedy and Taxi Driver. I'm curious to see if that's the case because a lot of times. That's another thing, too, that I wonder, because a lot of people say that a lot of things now mirror other things or try to copy or something. It's like, well, I don't know if that's their intention, if that's the case, or if it's coincidence.
Modern-day filmmakers are heavily influenced by the stuff that they've watched.
I mean, I agree, but like some things, I don't know if they're deliberately...
Joker has a very heavy... I've seen a number of people comment on the fact that it's very... heavily influenced by Martin Scorsese. So, and yeah, Tommy's got it right. Very few movies are truly original. I have said for a number of years that there are no original ideas anymore. They are original combinations of elements. And you're going to get things that you've seen in other places before. It's how those things are put together that makes it either original or derivative. But your different pieces of your story you're going to see in various different places. Because essentially it goes down to man versus man, man versus himself, man versus nature.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, you definitely need to see Apocalypse Now.
I was like, I definitely need to see like over 100 movies. Like, that's the thing. It's like I've only been into film for 5 years. Like I think I'm doing all right.
Young yet. You got time.
Yeah, I mean, within the last couple of years, I saw Jaws 1 and 2, Kill Bill 1 and 2, Alien 1 and 2. I've got a longer list than that. Inglourious Bastards. I've got quite a few that I've knocked out.
Yeah, but you got to go back. You got to go back further. You know,
I agree.
The
but
French
that's
Connection,
that's
Duel.
Going from 1940 to 2021, there's a lot of content. There's a lot of films, a lot of TV shows, a lot of.
Well, you go back to the
material.
1930s. You know, Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz. Anything from there. But Bringing Up Baby is a good one. Anything with Katharine Hepburn. But you've got. Charade, The Odd Couple. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that's out there that you need to have on your list. But you're young. You got time.
Exactly. That'll be fun. That's the one thing a lot of people today are like, oh, there's nothing to watch now. I'm like, bro, I got I got too much to watch. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing you could do is you could go in and watch when you go in and look at Steve Rogers' list. You know, when he was making that list of Captain America, of the stuff that he needs to watch, the stuff that he needs to see.
Yeah.
You know, look at that list. See what's on there that you haven't experienced yet either.
That's a good point, I suppose. I mean, I try to watch a mix of new stuff and old stuff, I suppose. There's some new things that I do, like Pig, for example, was one that took me by surprise. I liked that.
No.
I'm not a fan of current Marvel stuff right now, so I don't really care. The Suicide Squad, like, I feel is a 5 out of 10 type of range film, but I don't really care about seeing DC current stuff. And like I do kind of, in a way, I'm more familiar with that kind of stuff, but I want to kind of step out of that. And so I'm trying. That's why I like looking at older stuff right now a little bit, because I am going into, okay, haven't seen them, heard about them, let's check them out.
Watch some westerns. I mean, cowboys were the superheroes of the day.
I'm so mixed on westerns. There's some that I don't know. I've seen bits of a lot of westerns, I guess, growing up. Like The Good Man, the Ugly surprised me that I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've seen like Blazing Saddles. I don't remember too much of it when I saw it.
Blazing Saddles isn't a western. It's a comedy. If you want western, I mean, How the West Was Won is a mini series that ran on, I want to say it was on ABC. That's a very big production. You got to get time to it. But Rio Bravo, Red River, both of those are John Wayne movies. Magnificent Seven, High Noon. I mean, Back to the Future 3 is pretty much a western.
It's set in a western, right?
Yeah. But they do pretty well doing the homage to the westerns.
Right.
You know, they get the tropes, but the tropes are organic in there, and it's a fun bit. Unforgiven is a good one. Unforgiven is a hard one to watch, though.
I think I saw Shane.
Yeah, there's Shane. What else? Big Jake. You see, when you think of westerns, you got Clint Eastwood, you got John Wayne.
I think I've seen the guy the guy who was in the Mighty Ducks. I mean, he was in a western.
Young Guns, Emilio Estevez.
Yeah. I think I saw Young Guns.
Yeah. Oh, now Lady Toriel's got one. Quick and the Dead. That's a good one. That's a sneaky one, because it didn't do very well in the theaters. It didn't do very well in the box office. But that's actually one of Leonardo DiCaprio's early movies. It's one of his first ones. Russell Crowe's in that. Sharon Stone's in it. Gene Hackman. That's a fairly good one. It's pretty solid.
Okay, Tariel, I will mark that one down here. It's been a while. Good seeing you around here.
The Quick and the Dead. I enjoyed that one. It's fun. It's a good one.
This actually looks okay. Right here, I feel like westerns are so. I don't know if I want to say niche to it, that I guess I'd be surprised if they vary so much with how many there are. But
any period piece is going to be similar. If you look at The Mandalorian, for example, The Mandalorian is a western.
Mm-hmm.
It's got all of the same similar elements and story structure, and not necessarily all of the tropes, but the tone and the style. You know, the man with no name and all of that.
Yeah.
The Searchers is a good one.
I guess real quick, because we do got to close out here in a second.
Oh, yeah, sure,
so like I said, we could talk forever on this kind of stuff. But do you know any films that have a silent protagonist, like where other characters talk but the protagonist doesn't?
A silent protagonist?
I'm curious about that. I just don't know, because I feel like that's something that could be done. When The Mandalorian was announced, I thought he was going to be like non-speaking, but then he does speak quite a bit, and I was wondering, like, if he didn't talk, could that have worked still? Like,
there's a Clint Eastwood movie. It is a Western, and it is which one?
Yeah, in the chat, do you guys know of any silent protagonists?
I want to say High Plains Drifter. Um,
1973.
There's one, and I want to say that this is one that this one he may not have a whole lot to say, but there's one, and I'm trying to see which one it is. It's not Two Mules for Sister Sarah. He's basically the stranger.
Or I guess, do you think, because if you can't think of any off the top of your head for the most part, like, I'm surprised that's an element that hasn't been approached that often if they don't have that very much. Like, a silent protagonist, that's character you're following, but they don't speak. Like, I feel like that could be done well, depending on the director, the actor, what they're doing. That'd be interesting to see. If they could.
Well, that's a challenge, especially.
I agree. I agree. It's not easy.
Well,
but I think that would be interesting to see if somebody could pull it off.
The problem with it is any kind of a setting there. The danger is that it becomes a gimmick.
In what way?
Right off the top of my head, well, it just becomes this thing that there's no logical reason for it to be there other than that it's there and it's the shtick.
They have their tongue cut out.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any story that does that.
Because I mean, I think you could. I don't know. I feel like it wouldn't be necessarily a gimmick. I would give reason for why they don't talk.
If it's done well, it wouldn't come off as a gimmick. But if you don't do it right, it's all in the execution.
Like this would mean the camera work would have to really work with telling what he's doing and what characters, how they react.
Maybe the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Maybe.
Does he speak though? I don't remember.
Well, I mean, your protagonist, your Quasimodo, doesn't say as much. I mean, there's dialogue. Anytime you're going to have a sound picture, there's going to be dialogue.
Well, actually, Willy's Wonderland is the only one. I think he doesn't say one word.
He doesn't
say a word. That one. That came out last year, I think.
I don't know.
That stars Nicolas Cage. He does not say one word.
Oh, right. Okay, he's the janitor in the Chuck E. Cheese.
Well, yeah, he gets his car, his tires blown out because that's their thing that they do. Try to sacrifice people to the Chuck E. Cheese animatronics, but he doesn't say one word, and I really enjoyed that, especially because with Nicolas Cage, we expect him to say something, and the way it was, he just didn't. The other characters said a lot of stuff, sure. But he did not say one word, and it was like, I don't know, they were able to, you're just kind of wondering based on what he's doing. He's making certain choices, certain actions. He's capable in some ways. He's detailed to clean, so you're getting lots of character work in there. It's very
rare that you can pull that off.
I agree, but I think that would be an interesting challenge for directors to try. Is there a director out there that would be bold enough to try that?
Well, why don't you try it?
I will, but I'm just surprised that it hasn't been tried more because a lot of people try things that are, probably not as well done.
I think you have to figure out the reason why you do it. If it makes sense in the story, then if you've got a reason within the story why your protagonist doesn't say anything, then okay, but you have to be able to make that work.
Well, I figure it would be
within the logic, within the story logic and the universe that you're building. There's got to be some kind of a reason.
Well, I agree for the most part. Like his character in that just chose to not say anything, and I feel like sometimes because I don't know, because then it's almost saying like you just must, as a person, you just must say something if somebody addresses you. Like I don't know, like in the films, I don't know if they need to have an explanation for why they don't talk.
They do have to have an explanation, otherwise it's a gimmick, and people don't buy it. They'll go, "Why isn't he talking? Why isn't he talking?" If there's not something, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could just be one tossed away line of dialogue, but there has to be a story logic reason why this character is doing whatever he's doing. Michael Myers is a good example. Not necessarily the protagonist, he's the antagonist, but same kind of thing. He's not saying, he doesn't talk. But there's got to be a reason within the story, and it has to make sense within the story rules, whatever logic of the story universe that you establish. There has to be a reason why. If he's not talking, the audience got to know why.
Well, when you say that, do they have to know right away? Do they have to know
not necessarily
along the way? Like I don't know.
It could be a reveal. It could be something that comes out in the explanation. It doesn't have to be exposition.
So I was going to say, like, what if it's not explicit? Like, I'd say, what if it's not so explicit? It's like you could easily take away something from what's being shown, but it's not. It's not giving you the answer.
Yeah, but what's in the story has to be organic, and there has to be enough in the story that your audience can fill in the blanks of whatever you leave out, and they can understand what's going on. They understand why something's happened. And that goes back to, what do your characters want?
Does a story... So that's the thing, too, though. I think some for a lot of stories, I would agree that that's very important, but not every single story is, we must know what the protagonist wants. Because a lot of times this protagonist is going through the story where they're not being the driving force of the story, necessarily.
Well, no,
right?
But they still have a goal. Whether they're reacting to what's going on around them or they're driving what's going on around them, they still have a goal. You know, I'm trying to solve a mystery. I'm trying to find someone. I'm trying to rob a bank. I'm trying to whatever. There's still a goal. There's still an objective for every character in the story, whether they're the protagonist or the villain or, you know, some side quest character. And the audience has to understand, and whatever is going on camera, to a certain extent, the audience needs to be able to follow it. They don't necessarily have to understand everything right from the get-go, because you're going to reveal things, maybe, depending on what kind of story you're telling. And you get those aha moments, and you get those payoffs where the audience goes, "Oh, I get it now." Those are good, too.
Well, because you could also, I mean, mystery. I mean, you don't need to, I don't know if you need to have the answer to have that be workable. Like, I don't know.
You have to have some answers. You don't necessarily have to give them every answer, but you have to give them enough. Because otherwise, if they walk out of there and they're not satisfied with however you left them at the end of the story, then it's not a good movie. Whether it's an excellent film in terms of craft or not, if the audience leaves unsatisfied, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's always a happy ending, but if it's a satisfactory conclusion and the audience goes, "Yes, I get it. That's exactly what needed to happen." But you have to pepper in enough information for them to be able to come to that at the end. It doesn't always have to make sense, but they have to be able to follow it. That's just like when I was talking about Fellini's 8.5. I can't stand that movie. I watched this thing and I'm thinking, Fellini's having a fever dream here. But see, that's the whole point of the film, is you start to question whether or not your protagonist is losing his mind or not. But I saw it when I was 20 years old. I was like, this is, ugh.
Right, of course.
I've never enjoyed it. You know, Moby Dick. I hate Moby Dick. It's the most boring book I've ever read in my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
The only interesting pieces of Moby Dick are the pieces that Khan quoted in Star Trek II. And you imagine, I'm 17 years old. I'm a junior in high school. Star Trek II's already come out. And at my junior year in high school in English, we're reading Moby Dick. This is my very first time reading Moby Dick. And suddenly I see, he tasks me. He tasks me and I shall have him. And I went, wait a minute. What? So I see Khan, I see what Khan was quoting, and now there's context. But it's still a god-awful boring book. But it's considered a masterpiece because it did something first.
Right.
But you've got to be able, your audience still has to be able to follow along. They've got to be able to follow the bouncing ball.
I don't know. I gotta think about this more because I don't know. I'm not convinced that it needs to be like them not speaking needs to be explained necessarily, because that's like, let's say that let's just use let's pretend it's like a half-hour film or 15-minute film or something, for example.
Right.
I don't think you necessarily need dialogue to portray a story. A lot of movies are visually telling a story. A lot of actions. What if it's one person and there's nobody else to interact with? Do they have to speak to somebody?
Well, no, but you're making my point for me. If he's completely alone, then he's got no reason to speak. So within the story universe, there is a logical explanation for him not speaking because he's alone.
Okay. Yeah, I gotta see if there's other films that have protagonists that are silent. I gotta see if there's more silent protagonists. I don't know. So I can see.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm right off the top of my head. I'm not thinking of very many.
The reason why I'm harping on that is because I think it is a challenge. It is a challenging thing to do. I think that is very challenging, but I think that's what makes it interesting, is because that's some waters not very often treaded. So it's like if somebody could. In such a way, I'm trying to think of ones that, at any point, or maybe, I think there's a lot of films. There's probably more films that have a character that speaks, but then loses the ability to speak for the rest of it as the protagonist. That probably happens more often.
Now that I'm thinking about it, there is a movie, a Jodie Foster movie called Nell. I've never seen it, but I've heard about it. She spends a good amount of that time, I think, not speaking, because if I remember correctly, her character grew up in the wild, stranded or something, and they find her, and she's not able to speak. But again, you have a reason why. But she spends a good part of that movie, and I don't think that she talks a whole lot. The Miracle Worker might be another one. The story of...
that's the with deaf, blind, mute?
Yeah.
Yeah,
with Patty Duke.
Right. I got you. Man, what's the name of that again?
It's called The Miracle Worker.
Helen Keller,
yeah.
the woman in it anyway.
Yep.
But yeah, see, we could just do like a whole other stream talking about this kind of stuff.
But anyway, again, you have a character. One of your main characters, Helen Keller, she's not able to communicate because she's deaf and she's blind.
Right, and the whole thing is about trying to figure out a way to have her communicate, essentially.
And with Nell, if I remember correctly, one of the things is trying to get her. Trying to teach her the ability to speak and communicate, so they could actually understand what she's been through.
Right. That's good. I might check that out then. Hell.
So those stories are out there. I just don't know that there's a whole lot of them.
Yeah, I feel like it'd be tough for a main audience to find interest in that, but I think if they do them right, in some ways, I mean, they could be interesting. And let's say, I think Star Wars could probably have something happen where a character can't speak for whatever reasons, and you could have an interesting protagonist for it. But again, these days it's hard to tell with certain writers. It's hard to tell. But that'd be an interesting environment for it with the audience that it has to get into it. But
I'm curious to see what Star Wars Visions is going to be looking like. So that's going to be kind of fun, I think.
yeah, little new waters there for Star Wars.
Yep.
It's good. But yeah, with that, we just got to end it now. Otherwise, it's gonna be here forever. Ancient One. If you want to put Ancient One, if you want to put Second Street Marvel, we can raid his chat next. I think he's live, and I think he's live streaming now too. We can raid his chat. Let's see, he's there. Let's see if he's still live. He might have gone off now, and now he's off. You could raid Zod. I'll put his link in the chat, so you can do a rookie raid on Zod here. Josh, or Jason, thanks for coming by again. Sci-Fi for me.
Yep.
This has been a great conversation, man. Freaking
yeah, absolutely. And
we
will be live at 10 a.m. Central tomorrow. We're going to be we're doing our event and weather update for various different Comic-Cons where we've been following all of the different ones as they've changed their schedules, and some of them are going virtual and some of them are canceling, and we're looking at the masks, their mask policy and their vaccination policy, so we're going to do an update on that in the morning. If anybody wants to stop by, that'll be at 10 a.m. Central.
All right, sounds good. All right, thank you everybody for coming on by. Hope you guys enjoyed that as well. Even though Citizen Kane probably took up like 5% of the conversation, but I enjoyed the rest of our conversation.
Citizen Kane informs and influences everything else we talked about.
It's a good basis for other bouncing point for other conversations.
It is. I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are comparing Citizen Kane with The Third Man, since they're both Orson Welles projects.
Okay, well, no problem. I'll be putting it up on the Fandom Collective when I get to that, and yeah, that's great. Thank you all for coming by. I'll probably have another stream tomorrow. If not, I'll probably have 3 because I'm going to try to do Casablanca, They Live, and probably
Blade Runner.
Yeah, I might start with Blade Runner then. If you said I should space them out a bit, that way they're not too close. Yeah, so Blade Runner, Casablanca, They Live, I think, be the 3 for tomorrow. And yeah, with that, you all have a good one.